This is the motto of the show Hour of the Truth. Rome never changes. They used to call us heretics and sent the Inquisition to kill us. Today they call us terrorists and send on their crusades. Times and methods may have changed, the goal still stays the same. Extirpate the remnant of the true Word of God, Bible-believing people who uphold the truths in Jesus Christ's name.
From 1203 to 1805, 50 million Christians died, suffering at the hands of Rome, 'cause they believed in Christ alone. They died through Europe, especially Spain, for they saw all but Christ is vain. He suffered by his death for men, to save them from their awful sin. 600 years of martyred saints that history cannot erase. With iron heel and iron hand, the Roman popes rule the land. Those ignorant of history may be swept into apostasy. We won't be lulled by Rome's sweet lie, with 50 million reasons why. Salvation is by faith alone, in Christ alone, by grace alone. A sovereign God give faith to man. Salvation's in the Maker's hand. This gospel offends Rome today. They offer up another way, a counterfeit, a compromise. Beware the ancient papal lie, with such a cloud of witnesses who by grace died in their Lord. Recall their memory to say, by the same faith we live today.
Greetings and welcome to the Hour of the Truth on Thursday, October the 15th. Might be a little bit late here today. He's working, so I'm going to set in for him. I have my brother in Christ, Dave Baxter, and we're going to continue talking on the Pope's speech to the joint session of Congress on September 24th, 2015. But I want to start tonight's broadcast off with probably the most important thing and our goal and motive for Hour of the Truth is the gospel. And the book that moved me the most was H.Grattan Guinness's book, Romanism and the Reformation. That book took me back for about 6 months. It's probably all the books I read, it had the most effect on me. And any author, when he writes a book, he starts off the book with where he's going, and the conclusion is the most important part of his book. And I'd like to read the gospel delivered by H.Grattan Guinness out of his book, Romanism and the Reformation. Just give me a little pause here a minute. Can you hear me, Dave? Yes. Okay, sorry for that little interruption. But this was the last paragraph in H.Grattan Guinness's book. And it's in the inside. I put it on the inside of the Vatican Jesuit Global Conspiracy. Remember that there is only one mediator between God and man, that there is but one sacrifice for sins, offered once for all and forever, through the one mediator, by the one sacrifice. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. You need no mediator between yourself and Christ. And he got that from 1 Timothy 2:5. For there is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. The priest is a false intruder there. Jesus calls you to come to himself. He is both human and divine. He is bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh, yet without sin. God is in him. He is one with us and one with God. Suffer nothing to come between your soul and him. Suffer no saint, no angel, no virgin, no priest to come between you and Jesus Christ. Go to him for the pardon of all your sins. Make to him your confessions. He can absolve you and will, yea, does, if you truly believe in him. Priestly absolution is a lie. It is a blasphemous pretense. The sentence, I absolve thee, whether from the mouth of a Romish priest or a Protestant minister, is profane. Be not deluded by it. Your fellow sinner cannot absolve you from the sins you have committed against God. Turn from these idols and vanities. Jesus is all you need. His blood is sufficient to atone and cleanse those who simply trust in him from all sin. Search the scriptures. They testify of him. Come to him that you may have life. His heart is touched with the feeling of our infirmities. None can sympathize as he can. None can help us as he. To you, to each one, he says, him that cometh unto me I will in no wise cast out. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life. Thou art all we need, for thou alone art all in all. H.Grattan Guinness. Search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and they are they which testify me of me. And, you know, H.Grattan Guinness' book is called Romanism and the Reformation. And when you think it's only been the last 6-7 years of my life that Rome was part of my vocabulary. I've asked this question and yet to have anyone that I've asked this question to. In your first 18 years, when you went to high school, did you learn anything about the Inquisition? Did you learn anything about the Dark Ages? You see, I haven't found one that said they were educated. And it's a very revealing question. And I believe that every one of us is playing catch-up, especially the ones that are on this call. Because they know. And they're looking for just a little fellowship. Yeah, Walt, you know, I see what's going on. I understand why the Pope come over on September 24th. I mean, and so it's always a blessing, because you don't want to follow any man. When you find yourself following a man, you don't want to follow Walt Stickle or Dave Baxter or Jörg Lisman. You don't want to follow any man. Let God be true and every man a liar. Now, there's men have written and led. God uses men to bring his people to him through men, yes. But I find it, especially the last couple of months of my life, it's amazing how people want to follow a man. All they got to do is follow the king, is pick up their Bible and read it word for word. I want to comment. I got an email from a listener in England, in Cambridge, England. And he says, I simply want to let you know that there are some of us out there that your message is reverberating with a spot on it. I didn't pronounce that right, but you know, it's coming into their soul. I mean, they understand the message. We're just common men here on this broadcast, and we're using our minds, our God-given minds, to think. And what seems like forever searching for the hidden hand controlling world events, and I guess that it's God that gave me the gut feeling that these things were not right. Just a second here, and I got to.
Just thanks for calling. Have your name and telephone number, and I'll call you right back. Thanks for calling. Hey, Walt, this is Len. I need to talk to you just as soon as possible. 15 minutes ago would have been great. So if you get this phone message in the next short period,
okay.
We got a problem with the blocks.
So give me a holler. Okay. I'm sorry, men. I'm sorry for the interruptions. I'm getting back to this email. After what's, excuse me, I got to get my. Okay, I'm going to start over here. After what seems like forever searching for the hidden hand of controlling events, and I guess that it is God that gave me that gut feeling that things were not right, and hurtling down many rabbit holes and finding out the closer to the truth, the fewer there were that were listening or could understand. Through and because of all the deception. And what a game of deception they have given us. So if this goes through to you, I wish to thank you, Yerk, Tom, and many others for your continued work at exposing the enemy within and without and upholding the true gospel of Christ and fighting for the so important fight of the reformers who have been long forgotten by modern-day Protestantism. Anyway, that was from a brother from Cambridge, England. And I had a chance to talk to him today. And it's amazing, what it's done for me is Americans are in a box. The Europeans are in a box. And the United Kingdom is in a box. But as long as we have this blessing of the internet, we can get out of our little box and we can see what's going on in their brother's box. And this is a real interesting point of history. Everybody on this call has heard of Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes is the one that tried to blow up the British Parliament in 1605 with 36 barrels of gunpowder. They found him. There's 4 Jesuits, and they executed him. They call it Guy Fawkes Day. Well, in 1776, the colonists were celebrating this every year they call it Pope's Day. And on Pope's Day, they would burn the Pope in effigy. Because, you see, for hundreds of years there, with the Spanish Armada and the gunpowder plot, the Jesuits were relentless. They were relentless because, you see, they couldn't hold office. They couldn't build their cathedrals. Yeah, people. They kept all this history away from us. They kept all this history away. Here's England over here. And they had enough of Rome. See? So when 1776 boy comes along. First thing old General George Washington did was outlaw Guy Fawkes Day. Why? Because he was the father of the nation. He's in the rotunda. The father of the nation. Look in the, just do a Google search. He's called the father of the nation. Oh, George, the first thing he did, he called it childish. The reason why he had to do that is because he was a Roman sympathizer, if not a up-and-up Catholic. He was a Freemason, but the reason why he had to do that is because they had, the Navy, 8,000 Roman Catholics, French, were the Navy for the Revolutionary War. And Charles Carroll, his neighbor, helped finance the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence. Now, let's go back to my friend over there in Cambridge, England. It wasn't until he heard me talk about it a little bit that he started understanding November 5th and what they celebrated. This man's up about 59 years old, so he remembers as a kid, they used to dress up like a doll or a statue in a regular doll cart, and then they used to go down the street, and I might be getting a little of this wrong, but it was called pitch a penny. See, and then after the end of this, I wish he was here to explain all of that, but when they were done, they burnt this statue, and they still do this in England today. But the problem is that the people in the streets don't know what they're doing. They're burning Guy Fawkes. See, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think from 1776 to this day, they've changed the holiday name. It only takes a couple generations. And we've seen Guy Fawkes being demonstrated on Wall Street, this last fiasco they had on Wall Street. So the modern day people in history, they don't know who Guy Fawkes was, or and you see how simple this is. All of a sudden, this just opens up the door to Rome. Now, I'll tell you something too. For exposing Rome, I've been accused of idolatry. And I've been accused that, exposing the Jesuits in Rome is, that has nothing to do with your salvation. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. But in 2017, the Pope's coming to Germany. Excuse me, I can't think of the name. It's not Wittenberg. That was the name of the church. But the Pope's coming to celebrate the 500th year of the Protestant Reformation, of the end of the protest. That's what it's about. And to know how far they've gone and where the temperature is, where the thermometer of the American people, the Pope came over here on September 24th. He got a 90% approval. He got 11 standing ovations, 40 interruptions. And there wasn't a Paisley in the audience that when the Pope came to speak to the European Union and Paisley jumped up and said, "Antichrist, Antichrist." Nobody jumped up in the halls of Congress. And when Paisley jumped up and said, "Antichrist, Antichrist," they abruptly took him out of the Parliament building. Now, we have all watched that video, the ones that are on this call. We've all watched it, but I don't think we really understood the significance of what we were watching. If you in the camera, if you didn't look at Paisley, if you looked at all the other people in there, they were just, they escorted him out, and they weren't nice to him, okay? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Pope's visit. But this word, Dave, I'm going to ask you a question, Dave. Do you think God give us a mind? And do you think he wants us to think?
Absolutely. Well, why else would he give us evidence to evaluate?
And we're living in an era of postmodernism where evidence doesn't matter. Postmodernism, Dave, you can explain it better than I can, but it's really, there's no right and wrong.
That's about it.
Kind of boils it down to it. So you see, the biggest, one of the biggest pokes in the back that we get here at Hour of the Truth is, boy, you talk too much about the Pope. You talk too much about the Antichrist. And the question I asked you earlier, how many people on this call, I bet everybody in this call, if they went up to their 18th birthday, didn't know anything about the Inquisition and didn't know anything about the Dark Ages. Now, you see, when I get jabbed like this, you don't learn. I like to be refuted. Matter of fact, I have learned the most from people that I disagree with. One of them is Eric Phelps. I've learned more about the Jesuits. It's not in his book, but when I learned about Eric Phelps, and he wrote a book, 896 pages, and old Walt's reading about the carols, and he just forgets about them. Well, I had to dig a little deeper. Maybe I'm going down a rabbit hole that there's nothing in the rabbit hole. But the more I dug and the deeper I got in the hole, the more I realized I was right and something's missing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not beating up on Eric Phelps. He's taught me an awful lot. Then how about Chris Pino? How about Chris Pino? I mean, I've watched all his documentaries, every single one of them. And he's even got a series on the one he's got, The Hidden Faith of the Founding Fathers. He's even got a section in here called George Washington and the Jesuit Connection. And I just got this from this brother in England today. He had the same feeling he shared with me. He'd listened to that Hidden Faith of the Founding Fathers, and I used to come back and said, something's wrong with that. And see, the thing of it is, what we always got to hone is our discernment. That's given to us by the Holy Ghost. You have to question everything that Walt Stickles says. And you've got to question everything any man says. And you see, my knees don't bow to any man. should you. You shouldn't be bound to Walt Stickle or Eric Phelps or any Chris Pinto or any Billy Graham, all these evangelical leaders. Our knees only bow to our King, and that's why we're hated. Because it's a war for our mind, because they want our soul. And God instructs us so clear when He says in the red letters of the Bible, the Messiah's own words, let no man deceive you. We are commanded. You're commanded. If I say something that's not up and up, it's your job to call me on it. And when you see any man, my brother was a Jehovah's Witness for 20 years. They had his mind. When you find any man following another man, his authority is man, not God. I don't need there's not anyone on this call that needs, I know we're all educated a little bit. You didn't get to the internet, you didn't get to this call if you couldn't read and write. And we have been taught to read and write, and we are to grab that Bible, and we don't need any man to give us our doctrine. When you find a man that all he wants to do is give you his doctrine, just had a visit with this brother, and we brought up the Sabbath. Now listen, I'm not going to be pressing the Sabbath and that you should keep the Sabbath, but I will say this. God created the week, not man. And man did change the calendar. Rome did change the calendar, but they did not change the week. If you can read the first chapter of the Bible, you will know which day is the Sabbath. And I'm not telling you, if somebody wants to worship on Sunday, that's freedom of conscience. But I will say this to any man, biblically, which day is the Sabbath? You've got to be able to count to 7. And so it's the simplicity of it. So, Dave, as we get to the Pope's visit, when we get to the Pope's visit, let me see here, maybe Yurk is home. No, he's not home yet. But, and because, I want to talk about the Pope's visit now, and we're going to finish the Pope's visit, and I think you got a spot where you want to start, Dave. So you want to go ahead and start on the Pope's visit.
Okay. Before we start, just like to draw your attention back to one of his first statements that he made. This is how they control and set up a universal mind. Okay. And let me find it here. I would like to think that the reason for this is that I, too, am a son of this great continent, for which we have all received so much and towards which we share a common responsibility. Okay, this is the second sentence that he says. Okay, he's combining South America and North America and saying it's all one great continent. Now, what we know that that's not true. It's very easy to disprove. Culturally, our language, we speak English here, and South America is referred to as Latin America for a very good reason. And one thing I found out is that there's a Latin Europe, and I copied this out of a dictionary. The term Latin is used in reference to European people whose culture are particularly Roman derived, generally including the use of Romance languages and the traditional predominance of Roman Catholicism. Strong Roman legal and cultural traditions characterize these nations. Okay, so it's the same thing with Latin America. It reflects culturally Rome. It's been Romanized, Latinized. So we have a division culturally, politically, and religiously because Latin America is predominantly Roman Catholic, and here in America, we were once a Protestant nation. So we go to the Pope's speech, and I'm going back to what he said just before we left off. He says, "We, the people of this continent." So he set the lie. We're not one continent. We're two continents. And then he runs with it. Okay? And later on he says, building a nation calls us to recognize that we must constantly relate to others, rejecting a mindset of hostility in order to adopt one of the reciprocal subsidiarities in a constant effort to do our best. I am confident that we can do this. So he is now combining them into one when they're actually two, and a great divide it is. And this is how they introduce it, and then they set this into your thinking, and you accept it without realizing fully what the implications are. So I can go on now where we left off.
Well, like last week. Comment.
Okay.
In other words, this is a start. It's just a little catch, the get along of starting a one world mind, a one world mindset.
Universal mind.
A universal mind. And especially with the tool they have with technology, and especially Rome. It's not, we don't say much about it, but they have a tremendous amount of media, Catholic media, especially in this country, in the United States, and all throughout the whole world, where they control the media. They control instead of being, it was when, if somebody I can tell a lie, but I cannot tell a lie to the whole world, where they have the capabilities and they have the machine. Because when I see that school bus go by in the morning, the other morning I said just exactly, I said, I felt a lot of compassion for the mind control victims that the yellow school bus is picking up. Because every one of us in this room, in this call, has been mind controlled. I didn't get an education. But one thing I'm getting that I got more that's disappearing is being an individual. To think for yourself instead of going along with the group. Group think. You have, and again, To be an individual, you have to be able to think. When you think as a group, your thinking stops. And it stops, the word I want to say is productivity. In other words, we could still be living in the we'd still be living in the Stone Age if it wasn't for the Reformation. And that's right, that's where they want to put us back. They want to put us right back in the Stone Age. There's nothing new about this New World Order. It's just the Holy Roman Empire coming back, trying to get this mindset. And boy, they've done a tremendous job. They've done a tremendous job. I mean, I used to ask, before the Pope was coming, I would ask somebody, well, what do you think about the Pope coming on the 24th of September? And they would say, oh, I like this Pope. I like some of the things he says. I mean, the hook has already been set. And when I see somebody wanting to hinder my thinking, I have a real problem with that. Oh, you're talking about Rome too much. You're talking about the Jesuits too much. You're talking about the problem too much. Listen, you can't solve the problem unless you know the problem. And you got to be able to think. And I'm going to tell you something. I used to have an Uncle Bob. He was from Missouri. I used to love to listen to Uncle Bob. He was a dairyman. He was a well driller. He had a logging truck. He was an individual. And he wasn't afraid to work. Because of the Protestant Reformation, it enabled people to produce. It gave them a reason, it gave them incentive, because they could keep what they grew. They could keep what they produced. And in this short little conversation I had today with the brother from Cambridge, I like the way he said it. I mean, they've completely beat up the United States. They give all the tech. Where do you think that China and Japan got their technology? They got it from right here. It was given to them. I used to work for Boeing's, building the 737s years ago. I worked for Boeing's in 1969, 1970. Everett, where they put the 747 together. It's assembled here, but the assemblies come from all over South America and all over the world. They do the same thing with the Airbus. They're building a universal mind, to think universal. They're doing the same thing in Australia. And let's talk a little bit about the European Union. That's the Holy Roman Empire. Now, England still resists a little bit. But man, they got a handle on, the Jesuits are allowed to walk the streets over there. In 1600s, they were rounding them up. And you have somebody mock me for talking about the Jesuits too much? It's ignorance. Rome's biggest weapon they have is ignorance. They don't want you to think. If people were thinking, they could see who the Antichrist was. If you read the Bible, then look over at Rome, it's not even a good counterfeit. Why? Is because they're creating a universal mind. And they did it in 1776 in this country. But it's taken them a couple hundred years to take the individualism out of America. Because America was a producer. And I used to hear people say, oh, America produces 90% of the pollution, 90% of the pollution. They're consumers. All they do is consume, and take the natural products from the world. They're consume. I'm going to tell you something. To consume something, you first have to be able to produce it. The first oil well was drilled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The car was built here. But the diesel came from Germany. They built that, the Germans, and the steam engine came from Scotland. But one thing all three countries had in common, they were all Protestant. Because they had the lid lifted off of them. And I have people tell me that I'm not supposed to think. That's a postmodern mindset. It's a Jezebel spirit. And it didn't come from Roman Catholicism. It comes from Roman Catholicism. It didn't come from the Protestant Reformation. That kind of a mindset is a universal mind. When somebody tells me that I can't think and they want me to be universal, so it is important that we know some history. I've been chastised for knowing too much history. History is not going to make your salvation. Well, of course not. You think I'm going to bite on that bullet and go down that rabbit trail? You think that salvation is going to be knowing who the Antichrist is? Absolutely not. That's not a. But God instructs us. He said, "Come out of her." And if you do a word search on knowledge, God instructs us. He instructs us to learn. Where do you think why life is a little easier today than it was in the Dark Ages? Because of the Word of God and not following the authority of a man, of any man. Oh, there's so many men out here that want to go to the top. They want to follow him. Look at Rick Warren. Look at Joel Osteen. They all got a following. If you're following Walt, you're in trouble. We're not to follow any man. Let no man deceive you. I see York's there, and I'm going to invite him in. Okay, we're bringing in York. Anyway, it's
hello.
Hello, York. We're just discussing the universal mind, and welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Walt. I'm sorry that I'm so late. What's wrong? Dave hung up here, or what?
Well,
did you lose Dave?
Maybe he lost power up there too. I'll try to get him back.
Okay. Were you busy with the Pope's speech or what?
Yes. He was just reading this. We were talking about the universal mind.
Oh yeah.
How they're trying to create a universal mind. You know, and anyway,
that's one of the reasons of the immigrants also. You know, when you take away the culture of the nation states, then you will have a universal mind, because the people are not bound by their boundaries anymore, with which they were born in the beginning. You know, and that's how you create a universal mind. Tom Press states something like that in reading The Global Vatican, like the global village.
The global village, and we've heard Hillary Clinton talk about the village. You know that the community should raise the child instead of the parents raising the child.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well,
we give up our children. We give up our children when we accept the birth certificate, and then the child is already off the state, and now they want to go all the way, and take them away. Yeah, only parents who are so-called fitted to raise children will have the ability to do that. For the rest, they go to the Vatican, to the state, to Roman Catholic law, canon law, let's say.
Well, could you want to? I can't get a hold of Dave right now, so Dave fell off here. So he looks like he's offline too. So anyway, you want to go ahead and read the continuation of the speech, sir? We were talking about on the speech where he's talking about calling North America and South America one continent.
Yeah, when you can tell me where he left off, then I can pick up there. So what page?
I'm kind of lost now, because I wasn't following along real good.
I know where he started today. When our world is facing a refugee crisis of a magnitude not seen since World War II. That was where we were supposed to start it today. But I can't tell you how much he read, because I haven't been here. So when you don't tell me where we are,
go down to this conviction has led me. This conviction has led me from the beginning of my ministry to advocate at different levels for the global abolition of the death.
Oh yeah, okay, I got it. Okay, read from there. Okay, that's on the bottom of page 3 of the PDF document.
Yeah.
And you try to get a hold on Dave again, all right?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
He might be coming back in here. I see it. I see. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, he's back. Good.
Oh,
good to have back. Okay, Dave. Excuse me, Dave. Yerk came in, but I want to make a public announcement right now. My brother, Yerk Glisman, for the last 2 years, I've been calling him York. And I got to make a public apology, and I finally know how to pronounce his name. It's Yerk Glisman. So anyway, Dave, you can start where you left off there.
Okay, well, just to recap a little bit, the first statement the Pope makes, the second thing that he makes in his speech is, I am a son of this great continent, singular. Then he moves on to where we left off. He says, we the people of this continent, singular. Then he says, building a nation, singular. Okay? Your sovereignty is gone as far as he is concerned, America. So we'll start here. Our world is facing a refugee crisis of a magnitude not seen since the Second World War. This presents us with great challenges and many hard decisions. On this continent, too, singular, thousands of persons are led to travel north in search of a better life for themselves and their loved ones, in search of greater opportunities. Okay, I have a comment. Why do you think that is, Pope Francis? Could it be that Latin America is predominantly Catholic? Just suppose. Is this not what we want for our children? We must not be taken aback by their numbers, but rather view them as persons, seeing their faces and listening to their stories, trying to respond as best we can to their situation, to respond in a way which is always humane, just, and fraternal. We need to avoid a common temptation nowadays to discard whatever proves troublesome. Let us remember the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Wait a minute here. He says to discard whatever proves troublesome. Now, memory serves me right. Wasn't he just down in Latin America calling for a revolution? You have to break things. Continuing, this rule points us in a clear direction. Let us treat others with the same passion and compassion with which we want to be treated. Let us seek for others the same possibilities which we seek for ourselves. Let us help others to grow as we would like to be helped ourselves. In a word, if we want security, let us give security. If we want life, let us give life. If we want opportunities, let us provide opportunities. The yardstick we use for others will be the yardstick which time will use for us. The golden rule reminds us of our responsibility to protect and defend human life at every stage of its development.
Comment.
Okay.
The golden rule. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that any priest?
What leaps to your mind? The Inquisitions? I mean, that leaps to my mind. Treat others as you would want to be treated.
Just stop and think of the history of the Roman Catholic Church. Look what they did to South America with the Incas and the Aztecs in Mexico. When they have the upper hand, and this man talks about the golden rule, the reason he can, because nobody knows anything about Roman Catholicism. It's just another denomination. It's just another religion. When you understand the history of the Roman Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire, and this man has the gall to talk about the golden rule, man, this is why we need to be able to think. If we had some knowledge, I'm telling you, I flew airplanes, I drove trucks, but when I flew an airplane, I had to think. That airplane would go off the ground at a certain speed, not at 40, but at 65. And every airplane has got a certain speed before it'll start flying. And that pilot has got to think. And this is just another example. The reason why a man can come over and make a speech like this, because the universal mind is already started. That's my comment.
Okay. Picking back up, this conviction has led me from the beginning of my ministry to advocate at different levels for the global abolition of the death penalty. I am convinced that this is best since every life is sacred, every human person is endowed with an inalienable dignity, and society can only benefit from the rehabilitation of those convicted of crimes. Recently, my brother bishops here in the United States renewed their call for the abolition of the death penalty. Not only do I support them, but I also offer encouragement to all those who are convinced that a just and necessary punishment must never exclude the dimensions of hope and the goal of rehabilitation. In these times...
Comment. Let's go back. He's talking about abolishing, the global abolish of the death penalty. Can you imagine how far we've gone in a universal mind when the Pope can come over here and talk about abolishing the death penalty? the organization that has killed more people on this earth than any organization in history. And why? Why can he do that? Because they control education. And they got people busy talking about the warm and fuzzy things and the love gospel. Oh, these men love to preach that love gospel. Another one. How absurd. I mean, when I couldn't read, I've stayed away from this. To tell you the truth, this is the first time I've read this paragraph, because what it shows me is because, see, I said this to this brother from England today. When I found out by talking to him, we're all playing catch up. We're all playing catch up. How many people graduated and know anything about the Inquisition? We're all playing catch up. And when somebody pins me down and tries to kick me in the groins for talking about the history too much and Jesuits too much, well, I didn't get any history. I didn't know anything about the Jesuits. I heard the word Jesuits in the mid-1900s, but the Jesuits have only been in my vocabulary for the last 6. And the more you read, and the more you think, you're able to evaluate what you've read. Not if you think as a group, everybody's fuzzy and warm. That's my comment.
I also have something to say to that abolishment of the death penalty, Where do I even start with this? He speaks about having a dimension of hope and the goal of rehabilitation. I think that the abolishment of the death penalty and the goal of rehabilitation goes together with this Jubilee year that is about to start right now. Open all the prisons and let come all the people out of there, and all these people who come out of the prisons, whether they were on death row or on some else, also on some other judgment, they will be Roman Catholics. They are, if not in the prison before they are indoctrinated with Roman Catholic doctrine. And when they get a pardon, or however you want to call that, from whatever sentence they are about to serve, whom do you think they are most grateful for? Probably the person that let them out, right? And they will do anything for them, right? The United States of America is the country with the most prison inmates in the world. Not because it's the biggest country, but because the biggest percentage of the inhabitants of the United States sits in prison. And when he can give a general pardon or whatever to all those people, they will fight for him to the death. You see that already through the mafia and the street gangs that he controls, through various so-called secret organizations. This is just the same thing. Of course, abolishing a death punishment would be right. On the other hand, God also had a death punishment for certain sins in the time of the Old Testament. So there were certain things that you should not do. And it is written in the Bible, he who kills by the sword will be killed by the sword, right? I'm not an advocate of death punishment. I'm not an advocate of prisons anyway, because most people are in prisons because our world is so wicked in the first place. The reason is that they are going to make the world even more wicked than it is already by leaving all these people out, and they were going to have an army of that. I think this is also a point that you can view this pardon that he's going to do, especially coming together with the Jubilee year that is upcoming. It's the 8th of December, I think it begins, right?
Right.
So that's just my thought on that.
Well, and that adds to, yes, in other words, they're creating a mind in these prisons.
A global mind, yeah.
Yes, they're and see the Antichrist, is a government, and people, when you think of the Antichrist, people want to think of a church. It's a church and state combined, and the Roman Catholics control civil power in Australia, the European Union, the United States, and South America. And what York was talking about, it's in the history of the Waldeans. The Romans did. They let out some prisons to strengthen their army to kill the Waldeans. Now listen, I live about 80 miles from Pelican Bay. They send all the gang members to one prison. They are breeding a mind. You treat a man like an animal, he will become an animal. And you're so right. You're so right. This country has got more people locked up. The first thing they did is start building prisons. And these prison systems are a moneymaker.
All for profit, yeah.
All for profit, and they
are privatized even today. Most of the prisons, right?
Yes, some of them in some states are privatized. Yes, absolutely. But they create a mind. I mean, they have a bunch down there in Pelican Bay. If they turn them loose on the street, I mean, and people and coming down the road, they're going to have to make room or FEMA camps. But I don't like to get into the FUD, and I call it fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because we can see this, but we can see by reading the Pope's visit, we can see how the mindset and how devious this man talks. This speech is Jesuit casuistry at its finest. It's a mindset that, and they know exactly, and they know the key words to use when they want to excite this mindset. So, that's my comment on that.
Well, your comments couldn't be more on track with the next statement by the Pope. In these times when social concerns are so important, I cannot fail to mention the servant of God, Dorothy Day, who founded the Catholic Workers' Movement. Her social activism, her passion for justice, and the cause of the oppressed were inspired by the gospel, her faith, and the examples of the saints. How much progress has been made in this area in so many parts of the world? How much has been done in these first years of the third millennium to raise people out of extreme poverty? I know that you share my conviction that much more still needs to be done, and in these times of crisis and economic hardship, a spirit of global solidarity must not be lost. At the same time, I would encourage you to keep in mind all these people around us who are trapped in a cycle of poverty. They too need to be given hope. The fight against poverty and hunger must be fought constantly and on many fronts, especially in its causes. I know that many Americans today, as in the past, are working to deal with this problem.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting. May I make a little comment here?
Absolutely.
The fight of poverty and hunger must be fought constantly and on many fronts. The problem is that he doesn't tell us doesn't tell us how he is going to fight poverty and hunger. He's just rooting the poor and the hungry people out of this world, starve them to death. That's also a way to get rid of them. And that's when you look at Africa for the last at least 100 years, what they are doing on that poor continent. You know? Africa is rich in minerals, is rich in also in so-called human resources, and they starve the people to death, and they give them only this modern medicine, which kills, not heals. They give them vaccines. They sterilize people over there. They promote population control by using contraceptives. And that's how you root people out. When you kill all the people who are poor and are having hunger, are hungry, then the problem is solved, right? The problem is that he doesn't tell us the means by which he is doing it. But we only have to look into the past to see how he does it and how he did it in the past. So it seems a noble cause, yeah? But the methods they use to get rid of the problem is absolutely anything else than biblical. It's not helping the people, it's just getting rid of them. And of course they will sell us that through the mainstream media in absolutely other way. Oh, there's Ebola coming up, you know? They just raise diseases in these countries and epidemics that will kill all these people, and now all the poor and all the hungry people are all of a sudden gone. Well, we took care of the problem. That's what they do.
I got a comment.
Mm-hmm.
The fight, he says, the fight against poverty and hunger must be fought constantly and on many fronts. Can you imagine everywhere that Rome has, you know, like Mexico is 98% Catholic. Every Catholic country, like in Spain today, there's over 25% unemployment. You go to South America, every place where they have the dominance, it's poverty. And here, the richest entity, I mean, they got more money. They control all the central banks. The wealth of the Vatican is uncalculable. You can't. And they're talking about poverty. Why can they do this on this thing? Again, it's because they've got us dubbed down. We're not supposed to be talking about this. We're supposed to be talking about the love gospel and leave Rome out of this. Anyone that's covering for Rome is an antichrist. When somebody babbles and writes a book, and he writes the whole book and leaves on conspiracy, like the book that Alan wrote. You know, a whole book. None dare call it conspiracy. Writes a whole book, and he has the Black Pope write an excerpt on the definition of conspiracy. A Black Pope. This is Antichrist. And the Bible tells us there's many Antichrists. And I don't care who you are. If you're covering for Rome, you're an Antichrist. And that goes for all you dispensational futurists. You're covering. When you are covering from Rome and preaching a dispensational futurism, you are refuting the Reformation. Yes, all you evangelicals out there have refuted the Protestant Reformation. And to celebrate their 500th year In 2017, it took more than one liar. It took a horde of them. And the richest, and they're going to, and he's worried about poverty. I got gas too. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I would suggest that the Pope may be telling us how he plans to bring about this war on poverty, because he makes a statement about Dorothy Day, her social activism, her passion inspired by the gospel. And she founded an organization back in the 1920s, the Catholic Workers' Movement. And her political philosophy or economic philosophy is called distributism, which is based upon Catholic social teaching. So he may be suggesting a way to bring about these changes. I will go on now. It goes without saying that in this part of the great effort is the creation and distribution of wealth. Sounds familiar. The right use of natural resources, proper application of technology, and harnessing of the spirit of enterprise are essential elements of the economy which seek to be modern, inclusive, and sustainable. Business is a noble vocation directed to producing wealth and improving the world. It can be a fruitful source of prosperity for the area in which it operates, especially if it sees the creation of jobs as an essential part of its service to the common good. This common good also includes the earth, the central theme of the encyclical, which I recently wrote in order to enter into dialogue with all people about our common home. We need a conversation which includes everyone, since the environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human cause or human roots concern and affect us all. I called for the courageous and responsible effort to be redirected our steps and to avert the most serious effects of the environmental deterioration caused by human activity. I am convinced that we can make a difference, and I have no doubt the United States and this Congress have an important role to play. Now, in this time for courageous action and strategies aimed at implementing a culture of care and an integral approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time protecting nature. We have the freedom needed to limit and direct technology, to devise intelligent ways of developing and limiting our power, and to put technology at the service of another type of progress, one which is healthier, more humane, more social, and more integral. In this regard, I am confident that America's outstanding academic and research institutions can make a vital contribution in the years ahead. A century ago, at the beginning of the Great War, when Pope Benedict XV termed a pointless slaughter, another notable American was born, the Cistercian monk Thomas Merleton, who remains a source of spiritual inspiration and a guide for many people. In his autobiography, he wrote, "I came into the world free by nature in the image of God. I was nonetheless the prisoner of my own violence and my own selflessness, in an image of the world in which I was born. The world was a picture of hell, full of men like myself, loving God yet hating him, born to love him, living instead in fear of hopeless, self-contradictory hungers. Merleton was above all a man of prayer, a thinker, challenged by the certainties of his time and opened new horizons for souls and for the church. He was also a man of dialogue, a promoter of peace between peoples and religion." From this perspective...
May I make a comment there?
Sure.
He was also a man of dialogue, a promoter of peace between peoples and religions. That's exactly what the Pope stands for, isn't it? He is the big peacemaker, you know? And by peace he will destroy many, the Bible says. as I remember correctly, I think. That's just the point, you know. He was a man of dialogue and a promoter of peace between peoples and religions, and that is exactly what the Pope is. The point is, what most people do not get, is that he is on the top, playing all the people on the left and on the right, stirring them up, and then when you have control of both peoples, it is very easy to make peace. And that's why he is the big peacemaker, and that's why he calls about all that. And what do we have in the meantime? War over here, war over there, destruction of nations, and everything else. And then he can come in as the righteous peace man. That's exactly what will happen at the end of World War III, when you believe this letter from Albert Pike, which he wrote in 1871 to Mazzini on 3 world wars. The Pope can come in as the big peacemaker, and then they all will receive him as the new Messiah. Because we were struggling for centuries for peace on earth, and then he can finally bring it in. But I don't think that you will like the conditions under which he brings in the new world peace, as he calls it, because that is pure Luciferianism. Whether you go with his agenda or you be killed. Okay, that was my comment.
That was your comment? Okay. From the perspective of dialogue, I would like to recognize the efforts made in recent months to help overcome historic differences linked to a painful episode of the past. It is my duty to build bridges and to help men and women in any way possible to do the same. When countries which have been at odds resume the path of dialogue, a dialogue which may have been interrupted for most legitimate of reasons, new opportunities open up for all. This is required and requires courage and daring, which is not the same as irresponsibility. A good political leader is one who, with the interest of all in mind, seizes the moment in a spirit of openness and pragmatism. A good political leader always opts to initiate processes rather than processing spaces. Being at the service of dialogue and peace also means being truly determined to minimize and, in the long term, to end the many armed conflicts throughout the world. Here we have to ask ourselves, why are deadly weapons being sold to those who plan to inflict untold suffering on individuals and society? Sadly, the answer, as we know, is simply money. Money that is drenched in blood, often innocent blood. In the face of this shameful and culpable science, it is our duty to confront the problem and to stop the arms trade. 3 sons and daughters of this land, 4 individuals and 4 dreams, Lincoln, liberty, Martin Luther, liberty, plurality, and non-exclusive, Dorothy Day, social justice and the rights of the person, and Thomas Merton, the capacity for dialogue and openness to God. 4 representatives of the American people.
Just a little comment here, please. Dorothy Day, social justice and the rights of persons. On my second YouTube channel, I have a little upload that you could watch. It's called Pace in Terris. You are a person. We have to see that the Roman Catholic Church, going back to 1666 and the so-called Sister Q.V. Act, produced something that we can call today a straw man, which is a person. And we are all, at our birth, given a birth certificate, and a person is created. And that is the problem with human rights and the rights of persons. These rights are given by the Pope, and these persons are created by the Pope. They are not anymore, in his eyes, a creation of God, but they are a creation of himself, and he can deal with his people and his persons as he wants to. And he can give rights, and he can take rights away. And that's the big difference between the Pope and God. God gives right under certain circumstances. You have to obey his law, and then you also have rights. The problem is that the Pope's laws are a lot different from God's laws. And only when you obey his laws, you have the rights of these persons and so-called human rights. So I think this little video, which is an excerpt from Tom Friess, is quite interesting to watch. It's called Pace in Terris, Peace on Earth. You are a person. And if you don't have any idea about that, then study the straw man and study the Sestakivy Act of 1666. And you will understand this quote-unquote person, which is mentioned here. Because we are men created by God and not persons, as the Pope claims. There's a big difference. And once you accept this person, then you also accept his laws and live under it. And those are not the laws of God, I remind you. But please, continue.
Okay. I will end my visit to your country in Philadelphia, where I will take part in the World Meeting of the Families. It is my wish that throughout my visit, the family should be a recurrent theme. How essential the family has been to the building of this country, and how worthy it remains of our support and encouragement. Yet I cannot hide my concerns for the family, which is threatened, perhaps as never before, from within and without. Fundamental relationships are being called into question, as is the very basis of marriage and the family. I can only reiterate the importance and, above all, the richness and beauty of family life. In particular, I would like to call attention to those family members who are most vulnerable, the young. For many of them, a future filled with countless possibilities beckons. Yet so many others seem disoriented and aimless, trapped in a hopeless maze of violence, abuse, and despair. Their problems are our problems. We cannot avoid them. We need to face them together, to talk about them, and to seek effective solutions rather than getting bogged down in discussions. At the risk of oversimplifying, we would like to say that we live in a culture which pressures young people not to start a family because they lack possibilities for the future. Yet the same culture presents others with so many options that they too are dissuaded from starting a family. A nation can be considered great when it defends liberty, as Lincoln did, when it fosters a culture that enables people to dream of full rights for all their brothers and sisters, as Martin Luther King sought to do, when it strives for justice and the cause of the oppressed, as Dorothy Day did by her tireless work, the fruit of a faith which becomes dialogue and sows peace in the contemplative style of Thomas Merleton. In these remarks, I have sought to present some of the richness of your cultural heritage, of the spirit of the American people. It is my desire that the spirit continue to develop and grow so that many young people as possible can inherit and dwell in a land which has so inspired so many people to dream. God bless America. And that's the end.
Oh, finally, I couldn't much longer take that dribble.
See, yes, and it is. It's amazing that we live in the 21st century, and men, Rome is not even a good counterfeit. Somebody that makes counterfeit money has got to make a lot better counterfeit to pass it than. But it's the ignorance, and I want to say something about the sovereignty of God. If you read the first chapter of the Bible, you know God's sovereignty. He explains it completely. And yes, we know that God is completely sovereign. But listen, there's a lot of God's children out here that are getting swept away. And they don't have a chance to think. This broadcast is not, this is for people that God's children, I mean, they can come here and listen to some sanity instead of the dribble that they hear in the dispensational futurist churches, because it's just dribble. And it's real important that we think. God says so much about knowledge. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of knowledge. You can listen to Donald Duck, 6 hours a day, or listen to the same thing but be listening to Kenneth Copeland. You're going to get the same thing, the same dribble. And see, the brothers and sisters that listen to this broadcast, they realize that, yeah, you're all right. When you step out your door, the world's crazy. The mindset that you see, I mean, it is really escalated in the last 50 years. I mean, it's not only the United States, but I'll tell you, they have picked on the United States and what they do, how did they overtake it? They did it through education. They did it through education. I mean, the children that are getting on those yellow school buses, they're mind control victims. And God tells us it's not going to get any better. I mean, we're not going to change anything. God's in control. And if you can't see the sovereignty of God in the first chapter of the Bible, step outside and look around. You don't think God's sovereign. The fact that we're talking to each other here, proof that God exists. But we're talking on this computer. God's allowing this. I don't know how much longer, but we got it today, and praise God. But, go ahead.
I'd like to offer a couple of quotes from Thomas Merton, because the contemplative style, this is the new religion that they want to bring in. I think I couldn't understand Christian teaching the way I do if it were not in the light of Buddhism. He made another remark. I see no contradiction between Buddhism and Christianity. I intend to become as good a Buddhist as I can. I believe that by openness to Buddhism and to Hinduism and to those great Asian mystical traditions, we stand a wonderful chance of learning more about the potentiality of our Christian traditions. Those are direct quotes from Thomas Merton. Obviously a mystic. And again, he mentions Dorothy Day right at the end. Well, if you look her up, she was a proponent of distributism, which is based upon, again, Catholic social teachings. So there you have the economic system that they are suggesting to bring in. And remember, these words were received by our joint session of Congress with 40 interruptions and 11 standing ovations. And that's amazing to me. And that's about all that, I will say right now.
And it just tells us where we're at. God's children, we're reading the Bible. We know what's going on. This gets clear. The more you understand the Bible and understand the prophecy of Daniel, and God give us the light, but everything you see, every single night, I got an email, and there's a brother that doesn't like when I hit all the seminaries and Bible colleges, but every single one of them teach futurism, dispensational futurism. And when you're talking about dispensationalism, that is futurism. Okay? The two go together. When you say dispensationalism, you're meaning dispensational futurism. And what I'm saying is every single seminary and Bible college are teaching, they're teaching against the Reformation. They're saying that they're teaching another gospel, and they're refuting the Protestant Reformation. And and we live in and how did we get to this stage? How did we get to a 99% futurist in this country, and probably less than 1% of us are not futurists? How did we get there? Well, it started with Francisco Ribera, but there was many men that helped this along. This didn't get started by one man. It got started, the seed was planted by the Jesuits, and that's why the American Revolution is so important. It's the reason why they had to blind the people of what the real motive for the American Revolution. So how did Satan God, and you might say, and God said, if you want to be this, God just give us everything we wanted. The complete sovereignty of God. God said, okay, here, take it. You got freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of, and look what's happened. If you want to spoil somebody, one time I read I seen a documentation on lotto winners. And it's amazing. These people became basket cases. And I've told people, just kidding, I don't play the lotto because I might win. I seen this documentation. You just take somebody off the street and you give them a bundle of money, and you're going to see a destruction right before your eyes. Because they love this world more than they love God. And yes, our heritage, this country, the United States of America, was the Bible. But in 1776, they give us Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots. And it's so, you read Revelation 17 and it's so clear of who it is. And yet people will still walk around and not understand and criticize you if you talk about it. And I don't advocate any man that wants to cover for Rome. When I find out that his doctrine, his belief is covering from Rome, that's all I need to know. I can't change anything. I'm not angry at everybody I see because they're a futurist. Because we have the rock, and we are on the rock, and we know who the last chapter. But it is important to understand who your enemy is, to walk around day in and listen to the news, and going down to the local church and hear somebody babble for an hour every Sunday. You're not going to get any. You're not going to get any. And there's one thing that when you go to these churches, if you don't think you're a winner, They like people that don't think. They like that group think. They don't want any individuals. Because even the ones that are pounding these pulpits all through the United States, listen, when I can turn one of these men on, or I can read it, and I can learn from them. I've learned more from the enemy than the pulpits teach. I learn from the enemy because I know who the enemy is. And I think that's why the brothers and sisters that listen to Hour of the Truth, they're not following me. But if I tell you something that's just a straight out lie, if I tell you something that isn't true, you need to call me, because if you find me on one lie, lying to you about one lie, another one's coming down the road. And when I find a man lying to me, straight out lying, what can you do? What can you do? There's nothing you could do but take it, because you have the truth. And the truth always prevails. It doesn't need any man. Everything that I've learned truth from Eric Phelps. I can't say I've learned too much from Kenneth Copeland. I don't listen to him, but I have to say that I've learned from Chris Pinto. I've learned, and another thing, I understand how the Jesuits operate. I've had a sister in Christ. And anyway, I won't say any more because I got the phone ringing. So go ahead, Bill, and close it out away.
Okay, is there anything, Dave, you want to say to close up for today's broadcast?
Well, it sounds like we've covered all that we should.
Well, I'm not sure if we really covered the Pope's speech in depth that we maybe should have done it, but I have to say to my excuse that today I came right from work, storming here into, and my son was here. I even saw him only for 2 minutes because of that. I didn't have any time to prepare the speech and then read a little bit through it to get prepared on some comments on that. That's because I didn't go too far into that. So
it's kind of hard, isn't it?
Maybe we can do in the future a little bit a deeper analysis of all that drivel, as I called it, that he put in the speech there, or even go through his Laudatio Si when he spoke at the United Nations the day after he was in Congress. We just have to see the global picture, and I think this is what it all comes down to. The overall picture is that we are living in the end times, and that we are going with giant steps into a new world order. A new world order that will consist of a one world government and a one world religion and a one world economy. And when you do not agree with the terms of the government, when you do not agree with the terms of the economy, and when you do not agree with the terms of the religion, you will be persecuted. And that is probably the fate of us Bible-believing Christians. But we know that there is something better waiting than that what the Antichrist has to offer to us here, which is only worldly, only materialistic, only based on self. Remember Isaiah 14. Lucifer saying, I will exalt myself above the Most High. It all goes back to that. He even offered Jesus Christ the whole world if he fell down and worshipped him. And why did Jesus Christ refuse? Because he knew he would get it anyway. He only had to wait. He is the righteous owner of this world because he created it. And everything that is in the world is his anyway. Satan tried to sell him something that isn't even his. And Christ didn't fall for it. The question is, why are we so dumb to fall for that? That's maybe something our listeners should reflect on a little bit. So, when you covered it all and Walt is on the phone, I will close the call up. Thank you everyone who was in the chat room today and contributing to the broadcast with a lot of comments that I read over there. And I guess next week, Thursday, we will be back at our standard time, a little bit earlier than today. And thank you all for being here, listening to the broadcast and your support. Also on my YouTube channel, Joggler66. I get a lot of support from these broadcasts, and I thank you all for that. So until next week, I wish you all a good day. Take care, and God bless you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Keep on keeping on. Bye for now.